The white ship moved slowly through space with big red crosses painted on its sides. The UHS Mercy's Hope was a hospital ship that carried sick and hurt people from planet to planet. Dr. Marcus Webb walked through the medical rooms checking on patients who had been hurt in the recent war. The ship held 3,000 people who needed help, and the doctors and nurses who cared for them. Captain Linda Hayes stood on the bridge watching the stars. She had been commanding hospital ships for 20 years and never lost a patient to enemy fire. All the alien races in the galaxy knew that hospital ships were safe. They had rules that said no one could attack ships with red crosses because those ships only helped people who were hurt. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was the chief medical officer. She ran the biggest medical operation in human space. Every day she made sure wounded people from the war zones got the care they needed. The Mercy's Hope was like a floating city of healing that moved from system to system, bringing hope to people who had lost everything. In a special lab deep inside the ship, Dr. Nathan Parker worked alone on secret medical research. The official report said he was making new ways to treat people hurt in battles. The truth was more complicated. Parker used to design weapons that could destroy entire planets. He was so smart that other scientists called him a genius. But 5 years ago, he saw what his weapons did to innocent people on Titan Colony. That day, he decided to use his brain to save lives instead of taking them. Parker had spent those 5 years learning everything about medicine. He studied how to heal broken bones and cure diseases. He learned how alien bodies worked and how to fix them when they got hurt. But deep in his mind, he still remembered everything about making weapons. Sometimes, late at night, he wondered if that knowledge would ever be useful again. The warning signals came too late. Black ships appeared out of nowhere like ghosts materializing from the dark. The Vex-High destroyers were ugly, angular things covered in weapons. The Vex-High Empire was known for being cruel. They thought mercy was weakness, and kindness was something to laugh at. Their ships had never followed the rules about hospital ships. Captain Hayes immediately sent out emergency signals on all frequencies. She told the Vex-High ships that the Mercy's Hope was a medical vessel carrying wounded civilians. She showed them the red crosses and medical identification codes. She begged them to honor the ancient laws that protected healers during war. The Vex-High response was a blast of plasma fire that tore through the ship's middle section. The first hit destroyed Medical Bay 7, where children from the colony. Evacuation were being treated. Emergency doors slammed shut, but the damage was terrible. Alarms screamed throughout the ship as people ran to help the wounded. Dr. Rodriguez rushed to coordinate emergency response while Captain Hayes kept broadcasting their medical status. The ship's defensive systems were just small lasers meant to stop space debris. They were useless against real warships. The Mercy's Hope had no weapons because hospital ships were supposed to be safe. The second wave of fire hit the main medical storage area. Tons of medicine and medical equipment were destroyed in seconds. Dr. Webb was thrown against a wall as the ship shook from the explosions. He got up and kept treating patients, even as more blasts rocked the vessel. Nurses and doctors worked frantically to save lives while death rained down from above. Parker watched from his laboratory as the defensive systems failed completely. Through the thick windows, he could see the Vex-High ships moving closer for the killing blow. Wounded civilians who had already suffered so much were now dying again because someone decided to make Mercy a target. Something changed in Parker's mind as he watched innocent people die. These were children and families who had done nothing wrong. They were hurt and scared and just wanted to live. The doctors and nurses trying to save them were heroes who had dedicated their lives to healing. And now they were all going to die because the galaxy had rules that some people chose to ignore. Parker had spent 5 years trying to forget how to build weapons. He had buried his knowledge of destruction deep in his mind and covered it with medical training. But as another blast killed more patients, he began to remember the galaxy had made a choice today. They had decided that mercy was fair game in war. Maybe it was time to remind them why humans were so good at both healing and hurting. Maybe the species that could save any life could also take any life they chose. Parker looked at his hands, that had learned to heal and remembered when they knew how to destroy. The HFY had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They had hurt the one human who knew how to turn medicine into the deadliest weapon ever created. The Mercy's Hope limped through space like a wounded animal trying to find safety. Half the medical bays were destroyed and the other half were filled with new victims from the attack. Dr. Parker moved through the wreckage, helping wherever he could, but his mind was working on something else. He looked at every dead child and every murdered nurse and recorded it all in his memory, like data in a computer. Captain Hayes worked day and night to keep the ship moving toward the nearest human outpost. The engines were damaged and life support was failing in 3 sections. Dr. Rodriguez made impossible choices about who to save when there were not enough supplies or beds. Every hour more people died, not from their original wounds, but from the attack on their hospital ship. Parker helped treat patients with steady hands, but inside his head he was solving a different kind of problem. The HFY had made an error in their attack. They thought humans would respond like other species, with angry words and formal complaints to the galactic government. They did not understand that humans were different from every other race in the galaxy. Humans could change their morals when they needed to survive. 3 days later, the broken ship reached Outpost Zebra, which was a small research station circling a dead planet. Colonel Jake Morrison met them at the docking bay with medical teams ready to help. As the wounded were moved to the station's medical facilities, Parker quietly transferred his research materials to the secure laboratories. Colonel Morrison was a career military officer who had fought the HFY for 15 years. When Parker requested access to classified military databases, Morrison hesitated until Parker explained who he really was. Parker had designed the weapon systems that made human ships able to fight alien fleets. He was the man who created plasma compression technology and ion beam arrays. Morrison had heard stories about the genius who walked away from weapons after Titan Colony was destroyed. In the station's laboratory, Parker began combining everything he knew about medicine with everything he remembered about making weapons. He studied alien biology files and weapon design specifications at the same time. His medical training had taught him exactly how alien bodies worked, and his weapons knowledge showed him how to break them. The intelligence reports Morrison shared made Parker's blood run cold. The attack on the Mercy's Hope was not alone. HFY. Forces had targeted 14 human medical facilities across 3 star systems in the past month. The hospital ship Sanctuary was destroyed with all hands while treating refugees. Medical Station Nightingale was bombarded while caring for wounded children. The pattern was clear and deliberate. Dr. Rodriguez found Parker working in the laboratory at 3 in the morning, surrounded by medical scans and weapons blueprints. She confronted him about what he was doing, and their argument echoed through the station corridors. She accused him of breaking his oath to do no harm. Parker's response was as cold as the space between stars. The HFY had made Mercy a military target, so he was adjusting medical practice to include aggressive treatment of hostile organisms. Parker's first creation was elegant in its simplicity. He modified a standard medical scanner to identify alien neural pathways and overload them with targeted electromagnetic pulses. The device looked exactly like normal medical equipment but could shut down a HFY nervous system with a single scan. It required close contact, which made it useless for ship combat, but perfect for treating enemy soldiers who got too close. Captain Hayes supported Parker's research when she learned what he was really building. His biological weapons could be hidden inside the same humanitarian supplies that the HFY had been targeting. Medical relief packages and refugee transport ships could become delivery systems for weapons designed specifically to neutralize HFY biology while leaving other species completely unharmed. The breakthrough came when Parker realized that HFY physiology had unique genetic markers that no other known species possessed. He could create weapons that would only affect them and leave humans and aliens' allies completely safe. Medical expertise that had been used to heal could be turned into the most precise weapons ever developed. Working 18 hours a day, Parker developed what he called biological directive systems. These were weapons disguised as medical equipment that could target specific alien biology. His scanners could identify and neutralize HFY soldiers. His modified medical supplies could carry dormant agents that would activate only when exposed. To HFY genetic material, Dr. Rodriguez refused to help deploy biological weapons, but she did not try to stop Parker either. She had seen the bodies of murdered children and knew that normal medical ethics did not apply when facing an enemy that targeted healers. Captain Hayes provided intelligence about HFY fleet movements and supply routes. Colonel Morrison shared classified information about alien biology and military tactics. As reports arrived of more hospital ship attacks, Parker worked with increasing urgency. Each destroyed medical facility provided more motivation and more biological samples for his research. The HFY systematic targeting of human healers was creating the perfect distribution network for weapons designed by those same healers. They had given him everything he needed to turn their own cruelty against them. Parker looked at his hands that had learned to save lives and felt them remember how to take them. The galaxy had chosen to make healing a target of war. Soon they would learn that humans who could preserve any life could also end any life they chose. The HFY had awakened something that had been sleeping for 5 years, and now it was time to remind the galaxy why human mercy was a gift and not a weakness. Parker's laboratory became a strange fusion of medical precision and weapons engineering. Medical equipment sat next to weapons blueprints while biological samples were analyzed alongside targeting systems. He worked 18 hours a day creating devices that looked like healing tools but were designed to kill with surgical accuracy. The first prototype was beautiful in its deadly simplicity. Parker took a standard medical scanner used in every hospital and modified its internal systems. The device still looked exactly like medical equipment, but now it could identify alien neural pathways and destroy them with targeted electromagnetic pulses. Any HFY who received a medical scan from the device would suffer complete nervous system failure within minutes. Parker tested the scanner on biological samples taken from captured HFY soldiers. The electromagnetic pulse was calibrated to target only their specific neural frequencies. Human brain patterns were completely different, so the scanner remained harmless to human operators and patients. It was a weapon that could only kill enemies, and could be operated by doctors and nurses who would never be suspected. The second innovation was more ambitious. Parker developed a retrovirus that would target HFY genetic markers while remaining completely inert in other species. The Maros virus would stay dormant until activated by specific chemical triggers, allowing for precise timing of deployment. Medical supplies contaminated with the dormant virus would appear completely normal under any inspection until Parker chose to activate them. Dr. Rodriguez discovered the extent of Parker's work during a routine laboratory inspection. She found weapons disguised as medical equipment and biological agents hidden inside medicine containers. Their confrontation lasted for hours as she accused him of violating every principle of medical ethics. Parker listened to her arguments with the patience of a man who had already made peace with his choices. His response was delivered with clinical detachment. The HFY had made mercy a military target by systematically destroying hospital ships and medical facilities. Traditional medical ethics assumed that healers would be protected during conflicts. That assumption was now proven false, so medical practice needed to adapt to new realities. Parker was simply developing aggressive treatments for hostile alien pathology. Captain Hayes reviewed Parker's weapons with professional interest. His biological agents could be deployed through the same humanitarian supply chains that the HFY had been targeting. Relief convoys carrying medicine to refugee camps could also carry dormant biological weapons. Medical personnel treating alien civilians could secretly deploy neural disruptors disguised as routine health examinations. Colonel Morrison provided detailed intelligence about HFY biology and military doctrine. The aliens viewed human medical ethics as exploitable weakness. Their strategic planning specifically included targeting hospitals and medical transports because they believed humans would never retaliate against such tactics. Morrison's files contained battle reports from dozens of medical facility attacks. Spanning the past year, Parker's third creation was the most insidious. He developed medical nanobots that could repair human tissue while simultaneously targeting alien biology. The microscopic machines would heal human patients normally, but would attack HFY's cellular structure if they encountered alien DNA. Nanobots injected into human refugees would remain dormant until the refugees came into contact with HFY personnel. The deployment strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Human medical personnel would carry modified equipment to refugee camps and occupied territories. Routine medical examinations would secretly deploy neural disruptors, while humanitarian aid would contain dormant biological agents. Every act of mercy would become a potential weapon, waiting for activation. Dr. Rodriguez finally agreed to help after receiving reports of the latest hospital ship attack. The UHS Healing Light had been destroyed while evacuating wounded children from a war zone. 300 medical personnel and 2,000 patients died when HFY destroyers targeted the ship's medical bays. Rodriguez realized that traditional medical ethics were inadequate when facing enemies who made healing a crime. Parker worked with increasing urgency as more reports arrived of targeted medical facilities. Each attack provided additional biological samples and tactical intelligence for his research. The HFY systematic destruction of human healers was creating the perfect distribution network for weapons designed by those same healers. The modified medical scanners were completed first. They looked identical to standard equipment, but contained electromagnetic pulse generators calibrated to HFY neural frequencies. Medical personnel could conduct routine examinations that would appear completely normal while secretly delivering fatal neural disruption to alien subjects. The biological agents required more careful preparation. Parker created multiple variants that would target different aspects of HFY physiology. Some attacked the nervous system while others disrupted cellular reproduction. All variants were designed to remain completely harmless to non-HFY biology while being invariably fatal to the target species. Parker tested each weapon system multiple times using captured biological samples. The electromagnetic scanners produced immediate neural shutdown in HFY tissue while having no effect on human or allied alien samples. The biological agents showed similar specificity, targeting only the unique genetic markers found in HFY DNA. Captain Hayes coordinated with human intelligence to identify optimal deployment targets. HFY occupied territories where human medical personnel could gain access became priority locations. Refugee camps housing human civilians near HFY forces offered perfect opportunities for secret weapon deployment. As Parker put the finishing touches on his biological weapons, he reflected on how far he had traveled from his original oath to do no harm. But the galaxy had changed the rules when they made healers legitimate military targets. If mercy was going to be treated as weakness, then perhaps it was time to demonstrate that human compassion was a choice rather than a limitation. The HFY had made the fatal error of assuming that beings capable of extraordinary healing could not also perform extraordinary destruction. They were about to learn that human medical knowledge could be weaponized with devastating precision, and that attacking hospitals was the surest way to turn doctors into the deadliest soldiers in the galaxy. The opportunity Parker had been waiting for came when HFY forces captured the human colony of New Geneva. The aliens had specifically targeted the colony's medical center for destruction before herding the surviving colonists into concentration camps. Thousands of humans were imprisoned while Vex High administrators distributed humanitarian aid to demonstrate their benevolence to galactic observers. Parker had spent 3 months preparing for exactly this scenario. His biological weapons were perfectly concealed within genuine medical supplies that would pass any inspection. Vaccines carried dormant retroviruses, while surgical instruments contained microscopic payload reservoirs. Medical scanners had been modified to deliver electromagnetic neural disruption while appearing to function normally. The human relief convoy that reached New Geneva looked like any other humanitarian mission. Dr. Rodriguez led a team of volunteer medical personnel carrying supplies for the imprisoned colonists. Hidden among the legitimate medical equipment were Parker's weapons waiting for deployment. Every vaccine container and surgical tool had been carefully modified to serve dual purposes. Vex High guards examined every item in the relief convoy with paranoid thoroughness. They scanned each medical supply container and tested random samples for contamination or hidden weapons. But they found nothing more threatening than antibiotics and surgical equipment because Parker's modifications were undetectable using standard security methods. Inside the concentration camps, Dr. Rodriguez and her team began treating human prisoners while secretly deploying Parker's weapons. The modified medical scanners were used for routine health examinations of both human prisoners and Vex High guards. The aliens submitted to medical scans, believing they were demonstrating their humanitarian concern for prisoner welfare. Each Vex High guard who received a medical examination was unknowingly subjected to electromagnetic neural disruption that would remain dormant for exactly 72 hours. The pulse was calibrated to their specific brain chemistry and would cause complete nervous system failure at the predetermined time. Parker had designed the delay to allow maximum deployment before activation. Meanwhile, contaminated medical supplies were distributed to Vex High personnel as cultural exchange gifts, demonstrating human commitment to healing all sentient life. The irony was not lost on Parker as he watched alien soldiers consume medical nutrients designed to carry species-specific biological weapons. Their own cruelty had created the perfect delivery system for their destruction. Dr. Rodriguez moved through the camps, treating human prisoners while secretly activating biological agents in their bloodstreams. The nanobots Parker had created would remain dormant in human hosts until they came into contact with Vex High DNA. Physical contact between prisoners and guards would transfer the nanobots, which would then begin attacking alien cellular structure. The Vex High camp commander personally thanked Dr. Rodriguez for her humanitarian efforts. He praised human dedication to healing even their enemies and accepted a medical examination as a gesture of interspecies cooperation. Rodriguez maintained professional composure while the modified scanner delivered a fatal neural pulse that would activate in 3 days. Parker monitored the deployment from orbit aboard a disguised supply ship. Real-time biological sensors tracked the spread of his weapons through the Vex High garrison. Every contaminated medical supply and every neural disruption scan was recorded and analyzed. The precision of the deployment exceeded his most optimistic projections. The activation countdown reached 0 at midnight New Geneva local time. Across the concentration camps, every Vex High military officer who had received medical examinations suddenly experienced catastrophic neural system failure. Guard towers went silent as alien soldiers collapsed at their posts. Command centers became death chambers as officers succumbed to precisely targeted biological warfare. Simultaneously, the retroviruses activated in contaminated medical supplies throughout the Vex High garrison. Alien personnel who had consumed modified nutrients began experiencing rapid cellular breakdown, targeting their nervous systems. The biological agents worked with surgical precision, affecting only Vex High physiology while leaving human prisoners completely unharmed. In 17 minutes, the entire Vex-High military presence on New Geneva was neutralized without a single human casualty. Guard posts stood empty as alarm systems wailed unheeded warnings. Command bunkers fell silent as alien officers died at their desks. The biological weapons had achieved something conventional, military tactics could never accomplish. Human. Prisoners emerged from their camps to find their captors dead or dying throughout the colony. The precision of Parker's weapons was demonstrated perfectly, as every Vex-High soldier was affected while human civilians remained completely healthy. Medical equipment operated by healers had liberated an entire world more effectively than any military assault. Dr. Rodriguez coordinated the medical response as human survivors began emerging from hiding. Parker's nanobots had completed their mission and were now dormant again, having eliminated their designated targets. The biological agents would break down naturally within hours, leaving no trace of their deployment or effects. The liberation of New Geneva sent shockwaves through both human and Vex-High space. Intelligence reports struggled to explain how an entire alien garrison had been eliminated without any signs of military action. Medical personnel treating prisoners had somehow caused the simultaneous death of every enemy soldier on the planet. Parker watched the reports with scientific satisfaction as galactic news services tried to understand what had happened. They described mysterious illness that affected only Vex-High personnel while leaving other species unharmed. Military analysts debated possible causes while missing the obvious explanation that healers had become the deadliest weapons in the galaxy. The Vex-High Empire demanded an investigation into the New Geneva incident, but could provide no evidence of foul play. Medical examinations were routine procedure, and humanitarian aid was protected under galactic law. There was no proof that human medical personnel had done anything except treat sick people and provide supplies to those in need. Parker began planning the next phase of his campaign as reports confirmed that his weapons had performed flawlessly. The Vex-High would eventually realize what had happened, but by then it would be too late. The galaxy was about to learn that attacking hospital ships was the surest way to turn every doctor into a precision biological warfare specialist. News of New Geneva's liberation spread through human space like wildfire, but Parker knew the Vex-High would not remain ignorant of his methods much longer. Their military scientists would analyze tissue samples from dead soldiers and eventually understand what had killed them. The window for biological warfare was closing rapidly, which meant Parker needed to escalate his campaign before countermeasures could be developed. Parker worked frantically to create his most ambitious weapon, yet the new biological agents would be self-replicating and could spread through Vex-High populations via normal biological contact. The engineered viruses would target specific genetic markers found only in Vex-High DNA while remaining completely inert when exposed to other species. Once released, the weapons would spread through alien military forces like a plague designed by medical science. Dr. Rodriguez refused to participate in deploying contagious biological weapons. She argued that self-replicating agents crossed a line that even war could not justify. Her refusal created a permanent split in the medical team as other personnel chose sides between traditional medical ethics and Parker's biological warfare. Rodriguez continued treating human patients but would not help spread diseases among alien populations. Parker respected her decision, but continued his research with clinical detachment. He had already crossed ethical boundaries that could never be uncrossed. Each report of destroyed hospital ships and murdered medical personnel reinforced his conviction that conventional morality was inadequate when facing enemies who targeted healers. The galaxy had chosen to make mercy a legitimate military target. Captain Hayes coordinated with human military intelligence to identify optimal deployment locations for Parker's self-replicating biological agents. Vex-High trade routes and diplomatic facilities became priority targets for contamination. The systematic attacks on hospital ships had given humanity perfect justification for biological warfare that could be presented as defensive medical treatment. The deployment strategy was elegantly simple. Human medical personnel would carry the biological agents to locations where they could make contact with Vex-High civilians and military personnel. Diplomatic meetings and prisoner exchanges provided ideal opportunities for spreading the engineered viruses through alien populations while maintaining plausible medical cover. The first release occurred during a prisoner exchange at the neutral trading station Kepler Prime. Human medical personnel were officially present to treat released prisoners, but secretly introduced Parker's biological agents into the station's atmospheric systems. Vex-High diplomats and military officers were exposed during routine diplomatic protocols while believing they were participating in peaceful negotiations. Parker monitored the initial spread through intercepted Vex-High communications with scientific fascination. The biological agents remained completely undetectable until activated by exposure to specific atmospheric conditions found only aboard Vex-High military vessels. Once activated, the engineered viruses began attacking alien nervous systems while replicating themselves for further transmission. Within 2 weeks, the contagion had spread to 17 Vex-High military installations across 4 star systems. Alien personnel were experiencing systematic biological failure with no understanding of the cause or method of transmission. Medical officers who examined infected soldiers became infected themselves, spreading the biological agents throughout their medical facilities. The precision of Parker's biological weapons was demonstrated as the engineered viruses affected only Vex-High personnel while leaving other alien species completely unharmed. Space stations with mixed populations reported that only Vex-High residents were becoming ill while humans and other aliens remained perfectly healthy. The species-specific targeting was working exactly as designed. Vex-High military commanders began implementing quarantine procedures, but the biological agents had already spread too far to contain. The engineered viruses were transmitted through normal breathing and skin contact, making isolation impossible in military environments. Every ship crew and ground installation was vulnerable to weapons that spread like natural diseases. Dr. Rodriguez watched the reports with growing horror as Parker's biological weapons decimated Vex-High military forces across the galaxy. Entire fleets became inoperative as crews succumbed to cellular breakdown that targeted their nervous systems. Ground installations went silent as personnel died at their posts, unable to understand what was killing them. Parker continued refining his biological agents to maximize their effectiveness while maintaining species specificity. New variants were developed that could survive longer in hostile environments and resist potential countermeasures. The engineered viruses evolved under his guidance, becoming more efficient at spreading through Vex-High populations. Human intelligence. Services provided targeting data for Vex-High command structures and strategic installations. Parker's biological weapons were deployed through diplomatic channels and humanitarian missions that gave human personnel access to alien populations. Every act of apparent cooperation became an opportunity to spread species-specific biological warfare. The Vex-High Empire began recalling military forces from human territories as their personnel became increasingly vulnerable to the mysterious illness affecting only their species. Fleet commanders who had participated in hospital ship attacks found themselves commanding ships full of dying soldiers unable to fight or even maintain basic operations. Galactic news services struggled to understand the epidemic affecting Vex-High military forces. Medical experts debated possible natural causes, while intelligence agencies investigated potential biological warfare. But there was no evidence linking the illness to human activities because Parker's weapons were delivered through legitimate medical and diplomatic contacts. Parker received reports that Vex-High scientists were beginning to understand the artificial nature of the biological agents affecting their people. Tissue analysis revealed engineered genetic sequences that could not have occurred naturally. The aliens were starting to realize they were victims of precisely targeted biological warfare disguised as medical treatment. The race was now between Parker's biological weapons and Vex-High countermeasures. His engineered viruses continued spreading through alien military forces, while their scientists worked desperately to develop treatments or vaccines. But medical knowledge that had taken Parker years to acquire could not be replicated quickly enough to save their dying soldiers. Captain. Hayes reported that Vex-High attacks on human medical facilities had completely stopped as alien commanders recalled forces to deal with the biological crisis. Hospital ships now traveled safely through space that had been deadly just months before. The systematic targeting of healers had been answered with biological warfare that turned medical expertise into the deadliest weapon ever deployed. Parker looked at the spreading reports of Vex-High military collapse with satisfaction. The galaxy was learning that humans who could heal any disease could also create diseases that targeted specific enemies. The species that had made Mercy a military target was discovering that human medical knowledge could be weaponized with devastating precision. 6 months after the attack on the Mercy's Hope, the Vex-High Empire requested an emergency session of the Galactic Council. Their once mighty military had been devastated by biological weapons that specifically targeted their species while leaving all other life forms completely unharmed. Entire fleets drifted powerless through space as crews succumbed to engineered diseases that attacked only Vex-High nervous systems. Ambassador Helen Wright represented humanity at the Emergency Council session. She carried detailed documentation of every Vex-High attack on human medical facilities, including recorded communications and visual evidence. 14 hospital ships had been destroyed, and 37 medical stations targeted in systematic violations of galactic medical neutrality agreements. Over 50,000 medical personnel had been killed while treating wounded civilians. The Vex-High delegation accused humanity of deploying biological weapons in clear violation of galactic warfare conventions. Their military scientists had finally identified the artificial genetic sequences in the biological agents that were killing their soldiers. They presented evidence that the diseases affecting their people were engineered weapons designed to target Vex-High DNA specifically. Ambassador Wright's response was delivered with surgical precision. She acknowledged that human medical personnel had indeed developed new treatments for what she termed aggressive galactic pathology. The biological agents were medical responses to a species that had demonstrated pathological behavior by systematically targeting healers during military conflicts. The Galactic Council reviewed evidence from both sides while Parker watched the proceedings from Earth. His biological weapons had been designed with built-in genetic degradation, ensuring they would become inert within 1 galactic standard year. The weapons were temporary, but their message was permanent. Humanity's capacity for healing could be weaponized with devastating effectiveness when their medical personnel were threatened. Wright presented the Council with a detailed timeline, showing how Vex-High attacks on medical facilities had preceded the biological outbreak by several months. She argued that the diseases affecting Vex-High military personnel were a natural consequence of their decision to make healers legitimate. Military targets. Species that attacked doctors should not be surprised when those doctors developed treatments for aggressive behavior. The Vex-High ambassador demanded that humanity provide antidotes for the biological weapons killing their people. Wright responded that human medical personnel would be happy to treat Vex-High patients in properly designated medical facilities. However, such treatment would require the Vex-High Empire to formally recognize medical neutrality and cease all attacks on hospital ships and medical installations. Council members from other species listened to the arguments with growing understanding of what had actually occurred. Humanity had not initiated biological warfare, but had responded to attacks on their healers with medical precision. The diseases targeting Vex-High personnel were treatments for a species that had demonstrated pathological aggression toward medical facilities. Parker had anticipated this moment and prepared detailed medical files documenting Vex-High attacks on healers. The evidence showed a clear pattern of deliberate targeting that violated every principle of medical neutrality recognized by galactic civilization. Wright presented each case with clinical detachment, showing how human medical responses had been proportional to alien aggression. The council debate continued for 3 days as representatives struggled to understand the implications of biological weapons disguised as medical treatment. Humanity had demonstrated that their knowledge of healing could be turned into species-specific warfare more precise than any conventional weapons. The same expertise that could cure any disease could also create diseases that targeted specific enemies. Dr. Rodriguez testified via hologram about the attacks on hospital ships and the impossible choices faced by medical personnel treating wounded civilians. She described watching children die because aliens had decided to target healers during war. Her testimony helped the council understand why human medical ethics had evolved to include aggressive treatment of pathological species behavior. The Galactic Council's ruling was unanimous after extensive deliberation. The Vex-High Empire was held responsible for initiating biological warfare by systematically targeting medical facilities and personnel. Their attacks on hospital ships constituted crimes against galactic civilization that justified defensive medical responses from human healers. Wright announced that humanity would provide medical treatment for affected Vex-High personnel in exchange for formal recognition of medical neutrality. The biological agents would be neutralized through human medical intervention, but only after the Vex-High Empire agreed to permanent protection for all medical facilities and personnel throughout their territory. Vex-High military doctrine was immediately revised to exclude medical targets from approved attack profiles. No other species in the galaxy was willing to risk discovering what human medical professionals might develop in response to attacks on healers. The red crosses marking hospital ships now carried additional meaning throughout known space. Parker returned to pure medical research with his reputation forever altered, but his conscience clear. The galaxy had learned a fundamental truth about humanity through his biological weapons. Humans were capable of extraordinary mercy, but mercy was not weakness. It was a choice that could be withdrawn with clinical precision when healers were threatened. The aftermath of the biological campaign reshaped galactic warfare permanently. Military strategists across dozens of species studied the human response to attacks on medical facilities. The lesson was clear and unmistakable. Species that could heal any injury could also cause any injury they chose with perfect precision. Hospital ships resumed their missions throughout the galaxy with new respect from all military forces. The red crosses painted on their hulls were no longer seen as symbols of weakness but as warnings. They marked vessels operated by a species that had demonstrated equal competence in preserving and ending life when circumstances required such choices. Parker worked in his laboratory developing new medical treatments while remembering the months when healing knowledge became the deadliest weapon ever deployed. The galaxy would never again mistake human mercy for limitation or assume that healers could not become precise instruments of destruction when their patients were threatened. The Mercy's hope had been avenged not through military retaliation, but through the calculated application of medical expertise to the problem of aggressive pathological behavior. Humanity had proven that their greatest strength was not their ability to destroy, but their ability to choose between healing and destruction with equal medical precision and devastating effectiveness.